Hello, and welcome to The Discriminating Gamer, the board game review show that would like to ask you why the Siamese twins moved to England, so the other one could drive. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking of those kooky English, today we're going to be taking a look at Imperial Struggle from GMT Games. Imperial Struggle from GMT Games is a game in which two players take on either the roles of the English or the French during the Second Hundred Years' War that lasted roughly throughout the 18th century. And this game is a spiritual successor to Twilight Struggle, which was designed earlier by Jason Matthews and Ananda Gupta. And that game, of course, was a two-player struggle for world dominance between the Soviet Union and the United States during the Cold War. Well, this game, of course, is similar in a lot of ways, though it does have some very different mechanics and, of course, a very different theme. Let's take a look. The game board is a map of the relevant parts of the world to this conflict. You, of course, have Europe, you also have India, you have the Caribbean, and you have North America. So you've got these four different theaters that you're going to be competing over for all sorts of different resources and in different ways. Throughout the game board, you have various regions and spaces, and these spaces come in different shapes which represent different things. For instance, you have diamonds throughout the board, and these diamonds represent kind of political places where you may want to gain alliances with or gain influence with, and that will lead to certain advantages as the game progresses. You also have round spaces on the board which represent markets, and they in turn represent different commodities, different resources like fish, furs, sugar, tobacco, silk, cotton. You're going to try to corner those markets, or at least try to gain the majority of those markets as the game progresses. You also have various military places, forts, and kind of harbors, places that you can take over to give you kind of military support throughout the game and give you options as to invading various places and moving on different places. You also kind of have your original colonies, which are square, which can be taken over at various times, though that's a bit more difficult. Now, in addition to the game board, you're going to have kind of an investment tile board that you're going to be looking at throughout the game. You're also going to have four war boards, which represent broadly the War of Spanish Succession, the War of Austrian Succession, the 7 Years' War, and the War of American Independence. You're going to be placing items on this board, too, as the game progresses as well. You also each have your own player board. This is going to have spots for your ministry cards, for the fleets and armies that you're going to be able to create during the game, as well as information that will help you along. You will also each have your own player aid to help you with the various phases of the game. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this game, a lot of different phases, a lot of different things you got to keep track of. I'm just going to give you the basic overview of how the game is played. The game is divided into 6 peace turns, divided occasionally by these war turns. And during the peace turns, you're going to follow a very specific set of steps. Now, during some of the turns, you're going to do things like shuffle in different cards to different decks for the different eras. The first 2 peace eras are the Succession era, the second 2 are the Empire era, the third 2 are the Revolution era. So when you change eras, you're going to kind of increase debt limits, you're going to shuffle in new cards, get rid of old cards, etc., etc. Now, each era has 2 turns, and you're going to have kind of 2 awards in the awards box, and these are hidden. You don't know what they are, but you're going to flip over at the beginning of the specific peace turn. You're going to flip over one of those rewards, so you're going to know if there's going to be something specific that you and your friends are going to gain, you or your opponent, rather, will gain if they win that particular turn. Next, you're going to have a global demand phase. Essentially, you have a number of those commodities, like I say, things like silk, sugar, cotton, furs, etc. And you're going to flip over 3 of those, and you're going to see which 3 are going to be in demand for that particular turn. So you're going to try to gain as many of those spaces as you can to score the victory points and whatever advantages you can based on the markets you hold. You've also got a reset phase. Essentially, you're going to remove any kind of exhausted tokens you've got. You're going to take those off and get ready for this next round. Next, you're going to deal cards. You have an event deck, and this event deck evolves from era to era, and you're going to deal out each player with 3 event cards. Now, if you already have some event cards, you can take the new 3, but you got to discard down to 3 for the course of that particular turn. After you have dealt the cards, the event cards, you're also going to go ahead and put out various investment tiles. You got a stack of investment tiles, and you put them out on the investment tile card face up so that people can see. I think there's 9 investment tile spots, so these are the different actions that you're going to be able to take later during the action round. Now, you also have a ministry phase. You have a number of ministry cards, and these ministry cards are going to give you certain advantages during that particular era. They're also going to have keywords on there, and that's important because some of the bonuses on the event cards will trigger off of those keywords. So you look at those ministry cards, you go through, you find which ones you think might work best with your other cards or just help you do things you want to do during the game, and you select 2 of them, you place them face down. Now, what you can do is, during the course of the game, you can reveal these cards if it's necessary, but you can also, during the second part of that particular era, if at least one of your cards is face down, you can go ahead and swap that card out at that time. But once both cards are face up, they remain face up for both of the turns of that era. Next, you have an initiative phase, and your initiative is based on essentially who is losing at that time, who is behind in victory points. Now, victory point track, it's kind of similar to Twilight Struggle. It is from 0 to 15, 0 to 30, and 15 is right in the center. Now, the French want that track to move up. They want it to be above 15 or toward 15, where the British want the track to move down and be below 15. So whoever is losing, that is to say the points are in the favor of the other side, they will gain initiative for the coming round, and they can decide who is going to go first. They may want their opponent to go first to try to react to them, or they may choose to go first because there's certain things they want to do right off the bat. Next, we come to the action phase. Now, the action phase is kind of really the heart of the game. Each player has 4 turns they can do, essentially 4 actions they can do. You've got little tokens that are numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, and on your turn you place one of those tokens in order on one of those investment tiles. Now, the investment tiles, as I say, tell you exactly what they can do. Typically, they're divided into 2 parts. First of all, there's the big number and then the small number, the big action and the small action, the major action, the minor action. Now, these reflect those various spots on the board. Some of them mean diplomacy. You can try to unflag other people by paying a certain cost to try to unflag them in a diplomatic place. You can also place your own diplomatic markers if you can pay for the appropriate cost. You've got the money, and money represents you buying into those markets. So you can place the markets tokens in the market area if you can pay for them. And then you've also got military, and military essentially lets you buy fleets, deploy fleets. It lets you place more of your markers onto the war cards. Now, you've already placed kind of basic military tokens on the wars, but the military, one of the things you can do with the military is you can buy bonus tokens to put out there onto those mats for the specific theaters if you can afford them, and that will kind of boost your military presence during the wars. You can also use military points to try to take over empty forts or essentially attack other forts that have been damaged. You repair them and then you gain them. Now, some of those investment tokens may have other symbols. For instance, they may have event card symbols on them. If they've got the event card symbol, that means you can then play an event card, and you can play it for however that's going to act to you. Now, most of these have bonuses. Some of them relate to debt, and if you have lower debt, then that's a good thing because that means that you can go ahead and take that bonus. But it may also be things like it's playing off one of the keywords in your ministry cards. That allows you to go ahead and do that to get that bonus. So you get the action and then the bonus as well. Some of the cards are divided into, if it's the British player or the French player, that's what they get to do. Now, you've also got a kind of, some have a recycle symbol, meaning you can look at some of the military tokens you have and you can draw another one, and then if you want to, you can place it out. You don't have to, but that is something you can do if you want to try to make your military stronger in the various theaters. Now, there's also debt in this game. So when you're taking your actions and you want to do something but you just can't quite afford it, you can choose to take out debt. Now, both players have a debt limit. There is a limit to how much debt they can take out, and that is kept track of on this general records board. But you and your friends can go ahead and actually, you and your friend, rather, on your turn, you can go ahead and take more debt in order to fund you doing these other things. But like I say, debt can be dangerous because a lot of those cards may say you can't get a bonus if your debt is higher than the other guy. There may be some other things that affect debt as well, so debt is not really a good thing to have, but sometimes, in fact, a lot of the times, it's going to be necessary to take out some debt some of the time if you want to do what you want to do on the board. Now, as I say, throughout the game, your debt limit increases, so you can go into more and more debt as the game progresses. Now, you may have treaty points, and treaty points are like free debt. You can spend those like debt, but they really don't cost you anything, so they're kind of this kind of good form of debt that you can just gain at various times. And they can really be helpful. A lot of times, if you lose scoring in a place, you can still gain treaty points, which is very helpful later in the game. Now, after you've taken all your actions, you go ahead, you reset your treaty points back to 0. Any that you still have are gone, so you do want to spend them or you lose them for the game. If there are any cards on your ministry cards that say this happens, this resolves, it resolves at this point, and that can be some things like lowering debt or some other things that may help you at that time. Next, you're going to go through and you're going to score a number of factors. For instance, you're going to score prestige. Some of the diplomatic spaces in Europe have a green border. It means they're prestigious. You're going to go ahead and you're going to score that. You're going to look at the global demand. You're going to see who got the most of the commodities, and you're going to score that. You're going to look at a track, see what that gives you. It may give you points. It may give you treaty points. It may give you points, but give the other guy treaty points. Who's ever got the most total points in a territory, who's ever got the most total flags in a territory, will win that territory, and then they're going to get the advantages that come along with that. Next, you're going to have a victory point check. You're going to see if anybody has crossed the either 0 for the British or 15 for the French. If they've done that at that time, they win the game. Otherwise, you move on to the next round. Now, during the war turns, things are a little bit different. You don't do a lot of the regular stuff. Rather, what you're going to do is, one by one, in each of the theaters of the war, you're going to flip over all of the combat tokens you've got there. You're going to see basically who has the most combat tokens, but there's other things that may happen. You may force the other guy to take out debt. You may be able to destroy one of their fleets or one of their forts. And so there's some other things that happen there. You can go ahead then at that time and check the spaces on the board that have certain pips, certain symbols along the sides of them, and those pips represent military strength. You add up how much military strength you have. You look at the total number of military strength for both sides, you look and see what the margin is, and depending on the margin of victory, that will determine exactly what rewards you get, be it victory points, treaty points. You also get conquest points, meaning you can take over some of the actual beginning colonies that player had, that your opponent had in that particular theater at that time. You also do another victory check at the end of the war rounds, and then, of course, you go ahead and reset everything for the next war that is coming up. Now, there's some other things that are going on here in the game. For instance, if you take certain spaces, that will give you certain advantage tiles. If you control one or more spaces that connect to that advantage tile, and you're the only one that connects to it, you gain the advantage tile. And the advantage tile will let you do things like, for instance, it may make it harder for people to try to oust you from certain positions, or it may allow you to put conflict markers on the board, and conflict markers will allow you to essentially take over other areas from places on your actions if that's something that you want to do as well. So you go through all these phases in the action rounds, you're going back and forth, you're trying to corner markets, you're trying to gain political power and political dominance, you're also trying to militarily be on top and be able to defeat your enemy in the next war. So there's a lot of different things going on here, but what you do is you go through all these different phases, and if no one has gotten to the victory by the check victory point at the end of each turn, you go to final scoring, and whoever has the marker on their side of 15, they will win, but you can actually go lower than 0 and higher than 15 by stacking your own flag markers next to it. Whoever has the points on their side at the end of the game wins Imperial Struggle. So I've got a lot to say about Imperial Struggle, but before I do, just a caveat, I've only played it once, and I was thinking maybe I should play it a time or two again before I do my review, but there's so much I wanted to say about it right now that I decided to go ahead and I'm going to do my review based on the one play, and if I have anything to say in the future, if I have any changes, I'll let you know, but more will become clear as I talk. So So first of all, I'm really glad this was not just a clone of Twilight Struggle. I was kind of scared initially that it was essentially just going to be a Twilight Struggle clone, and it's not. It takes a lot of the systems from Twilight Struggle, but it tweaks them, it evolves them, it changes them in new and different ways. And for the most part, very well done there. The evolution of the game system works. Where Twilight Struggle is a card-driven game, this feels more like a card-enhanced game. The cards are not as important in this game as they were in Twilight Struggle. I'm not suggesting they're not important. They are. They can be very powerful. But in Twilight Struggle, it was all about the cards. Here, it's a little different. The card play is a little different, and there's other factors that are arguably more important. One of the things that makes this game quite different is that investment tile mechanic, because what that does is essentially it makes this game kind of a worker placement game. It's kind of worker placement as you're attempting to place your points, your turn markers on those points. There's only so many, so you're kind of competing for them. You know, you may want to take that big action, but you also want one that's got an event because you want to play an event that turn. And you may not be able to find something that does it, so you got to make the best out of both worlds. And that's really where the tough decisions kick in, or at least some of the tough decisions in this game, is which tile do you go for? And as the game progresses and you each get more and more out and your options become more and more limited, it becomes quite heated and very interesting and fun. And I really like that aspect of the game. You've also got the interesting aspect of the game where you've got, of course, the event cards, but you've also got the ministry cards. And the ministry kind of allow you to, as I say, do certain advantages, but they also allow you to kind of enhance the event cards with those keywords. So again, you're trying to make those decisions of, do I want, maybe I want the abilities from this card and this card, but I kind of want the keywords from this card and this card because that will help the event cards I want to play. So that's kind of another great dilemma that you face in this game as well. But of course, the big dilemma here, like in Twilight Struggle, is where do I play my actions? Where do I want to move? You know, this is an area control game. Where am I best? Where can I best realize victory with the limited options I have? Do I go for politics in Europe? Do I try to go for trade in India or the Caribbean? Do I try to build up my military in North America? You know, how best do I use what I've got? And that too is something that is very, very, very important in this game. I like going for those advantage tokens. I like because again, it gives you things like those conquest markers that you can put out there, and it gives you things like the securing your positions in other parts of the board. I like that. And it's cool because it allows you to play, or it enhances the reason. It gives you an incentive, I guess, to try to go for some places. And so I like that, and that's fairly well done as well. All told, I really like the kind of the larger competition that this game brings to it from, say, a Twilight Struggle. I like that there's kind of multiple levels here, multiple things going on. It's not all just influence we're placing across the board. We're competing for markets. We're competing militarily. We're competing, politically. I like those aspects of the game quite a bit. I really like debt. I really like the debt system, how you can take out more debt, but it can cost you, it can hurt you, but sometimes you just want to take certain actions, so you got to incur debt. It's just another neat little tweak that the game uses there. And then the treaty points, which are like free debt, works very, very well in this game, and I really like that aspect of it as well. I like the peace turns and how they are kind of separated by the war turns. Some of them are separated by the war turns, and I like how the war turns and the wars resolve, and how it's kind of a numbers game, but how you get to those numbers is very interesting, and you always think you've got it, and a lot of times you'll miss something, and you're like, ah! And that's good competition there as well, too, and I like that. All told, I gotta say, I really like this game. I think it's a very, very good game. But I have some criticisms that are not huge, but I want to mention them. First of all, there's a learning curve here, and there's a learning curve with Twilight Struggle. But with Imperial Struggle, it seems like because there are these different systems going on, it is bigger, and it's easy to forget stuff, exactly how some of the systems work. And again, this is first game problems. I'm sure the more you play it, the more intuitive this becomes. But that first game, particularly those first few rounds, are quite brutal. Now, I played with Han, and Han's pretty on the ball. Han's a pretty on the ball guy, and he was got it, I think, right off the bat. It probably took me till about turn 3 or 4 to really get into the flow of the game, to really kind of understand how everything was going on. So I expect from here on out it'll be fine. It was about a 4-hour game because those first few turns were pretty slow, and largely because of me, because I was trying to understand what was going on. Just be aware of this. There's a big learning curve with this game, a fairly big learning curve. And I wish the rulebook had been a little more intuitive, I guess. To me, the rulebook, it wasn't bad. It wasn't a horrible rulebook. But it was a rule book that when I was reading it, I didn't get the flow just from reading the rules. And a lot of games are like that. A lot of games I got to play before I really get the flow. But this one, I just felt could have been a little simplified. I felt like that. And part of that, too, is there's a lot of these little rules that pop up here and there that you're kind of scratching your head about. And you got to look in the rule book. And again, I'm thinking with more play, this will become. I got that. But it just seemed like there was a lot of little things here that were kind of like that kind of bothered me a little bit, that kind of interrupted the game for me. So there's that. Again, not a huge deal, but it's there. Be aware of it. There's also some iconography. Now, the basic iconography of politics and money and military, that's easy. You get that easy. But like on some of the tokens, I wish they'd had that printed on the player aid, exactly what the things on the tokens say. And there's not a lot of them, but again, it's just enough that you got to go to the rule book, and it kind of interrupts things. And again, I'm sure with more games that'll work out. So there are some issues with the game, but nothing that puts a stake through the heart, so to say. In fact, I'm pretty sure most of these problems will be alleviated with more play. So I think what I'm saying is there's a big learning curve here, right? Right now, I will say, first of all, I love Twilight Struggle. I absolutely love Twilight Struggle. One of my absolute favorite games, top 20 game. Sometimes, maybe even, I'm thinking it could easily be in the top 10, but I love that game. And its successors, 1989, 1960. I really love Twilight Struggle. My feeling with Imperial Struggle right now, after one game, is I like it. I like it a lot. I don't know that I love it yet. I think I may with more play. In fact, if I were a betting man, I'd say I will like it with more play. I cannot see me liking it less with more play. I may just be where I am at now, liking it a lot and never loving it. Or I could love it. And I realize that's a real subtle distinction, and I realize it's all subjective, but I just wanted to tell you where I'm at. All told, I have no problem recommending this game to people to buy it, with the caveat there's a pretty steep learning curve, but I think it's worth it. I think you will get a kick out of it. If you've liked Twilight Struggle, I think you will like this evolution of it. You'll like seeing kind of the different ways this game is going. I think you'll get a big kick out of it. So the recommendation for the discriminating gamer is, go ahead. If you like what these designers and GMT and this line has done before, I think you will get a big kick out of what they do with Imperial Struggle. Go ahead, buy it. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. We are The Discriminating Gamer, and I've got a pretty good French joke for you now. Qu'est-ce qui est petite, ronde, verte, et qui monte et qui descend? A pee in an elevator.
Again, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band.
Today, we're going to take a look at Twilight Struggle, a quasi-war game that claims to recreate the intrigue and suspense of the Cold War.
That's right. Sean, I gotta tell you, I really love that Uncle Sam outfit and the way you've really gotten into the spirit of this game.
Thanks, Cody. And I like how you've really gotten into the spirit of the game with your drab, humble, communist clothing, your round, Khrushchev-like face, that blank stare that just screams public education, your propensity to always split the bill perfectly even, although we know that you ate more onion rings than the rest of us, and your unwillingness to name names even though you are full aware who egged my car last week, and your complete lack of overall hygiene that will ensure that no one ever loves you. You have really brought the whole feel of communism to the table. Well, anyway, on with the review.
Yeah, let's review the game now.